the constant haranguing, of our conscious mind.
I know it well, yes.
Yeah. Well, it just drowns out your best ideas.
I'm joined today by Dr. Danny Penman, and if that name Penman sounds like a superhero alter ego, Penman, then you're not far off, because Dan's been using his pen to help people for his entire career. Dan had a successful career as a journalist and was awarded awards by the RSPCA and by the Humane Society of America for his work as an investigative journalist into animal rights abuses all around the world. And then he's had a second career as an author, writing predominantly about mindfulness, most famously writing Mindfulness, the Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World with Professor Mark Williams. But also writing Mindfulness for Health with Vijaamala Birch, which is one of the few books that's available on prescription from the NHS. And his solo work, Mindfulness for Creativity, which I think is going to be, hopefully, we'll get a chance to talk about today. And then he's recently picked up the pen again to write The Art of Breathing, which is this wonderful book. So we'll hopefully get a chance to talk about that as well today. Danny, thank you so much for joining me today.
That's great to be here.
I had a look into your some of the articles you've written when you're an investigative journalist. And it struck me how sort of stressful that job might have been, not only wearing hidden cameras and exposing things that need to be exposed, but also just some of the things you must have seen doing that. And I wonder, did any of that inform your interest in mindfulness? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I always, luckily I was taught meditation. It was just called meditation in the 80s when I learned it in the sixth form. And, I always found it quite useful in periods of acute stress, whether it be, exams or, stressful situations, to do with work or, just relaxing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, but I never really attached much significance to it. It was just purely a stress relief tool. And it was only later I realised its true power after a really bad paragliding accident, which left me in a really bad way. I was in hospital for a month. I had 3 major operations. I was in a lot of pain for 5 or 6 months.
Wow.
So, and I used the meditations I learned 20 years previously, and found them incredibly effective for not only stress and anxiety relief, but also pain relief. So that's kind of how I, became fascinated by mindfulness.
Yeah. So paragliding and investigative journalism, I'm sensing like a bit of an adrenaline junkie to begin with.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I used to, I was always into high-powered motorbikes, doing stupid things at high speed. Kind of, why not really? Tell you when it goes wrong that it's, you start to regret it.
Yeah, but you managed to use it as a learning experience.
Yeah.
And so that accident where you with the paragliding, was that when you really began finding an interest in it and you delved into it? So what was the leap from journalism to writing books?
I found the techniques so amazingly powerful. I didn't know, people didn't call it mindfulness even 12, 14 years ago, unless they were either Buddhists or academics researching it. As far as the general population was concerned, it was just called meditation. So I started using these very, very basic breathing meditations to help me cope with the pain and the stress of my accident. And one day I came across the work of Professor Mark Williams at Oxford, and he had taken mindfulness and turned it into a technique known as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So it's essentially a combination of mindfulness, the series of meditations, and cognitive behavioral therapy. And they had discovered that it was fantastic for the worst forms of depression. In fact, it was at least as good as the best pharmaceuticals and counselling especially for actually the worst forms of depression. That's the great paradox is mindfulness is slightly less effective for the milder forms of depression. It's still good, but it's actually the worst ones that it is highly effective.
Wow.
For. So I came across his work. It was actually just like a tiny 200-word article in the Financial Times magazine, I think it was. And I was literally just flicking through it.
Yeah.
Saw this tiny article about a book that he'd just co-authored. I think it was called The Mindful Way Through Depression. I thought that sounds really interesting. Immediately got a copy. And it was one of the most important books I've ever read or come across. It's beautifully written. But most importantly is the techniques were phenomenally powerful. So I started to do them to kind of enhance my own practice to cope with, the chronic pain. Found it so important. Eventually I thought, I've got to let the world know about this. I'm a journalist, so I'm going to take these ideas and try and get them into newspapers. Nobody was interested, and I always found this incredibly frustrating because I knew the power of this. I knew the academic research as well. Nobody was interested at all. But eventually I got something into the Telegraph magazine, and then that was it for a couple of years. Nobody else was interested. And I found this so frustrating that eventually, I'd got Stone Mark quite well at this point. And we decided, we're just going to take this work and turn it into a book that anyone can use. You use the term popular book. Well, I suppose that's what it's become.
Very popular.
Yes. And so we just, just thought we've got to take this work. It's got to get out to as many people as possible. And but I didn't expect it to sell. I thought there's quite a few times when we were working on this book and I was thinking, if this does really well, we'll sell 5,000 copies.
And now I think it's been in and out of the Amazon top 100 every year since it's
It's it sells like 1.5 million copies now.
Wow.
Around the world.
Wow.
And it is succeeded way beyond.
Yeah. And do you think that's because it meets a need, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's what it is. You can write the best book in the world, but if there's no need for it, it won't succeed.
Yeah. And I'm kind of assuming a level of knowledge for people watching this that they've probably either read a book or had a go at meditating before. But in your newest book, there's a really beautiful line where you say, meditation is living in the moment, not for the moment. And I wondered if you could just expand on that for people who may be...
Yeah, most people, I think, get confused between the two because, hedonism is wonderful. I've spent many years living a hedonistic lifestyle myself, but that's not mindfulness. You're living for the moment is great. More people need to do it, I think. But also it's important to live in the moment.
Yes, because if you're living for the moment but you're not in it when it happens, then you're missing out.
I think you need to do both.
So you also, as a follow-up, I think you wrote them after the Mark Williams co-author, but you wrote Mindfulness for Health with Jamal Birch, and then the book that I'd like to kind of get into today is Mindfulness for Creativity. What is the relationship between mindfulness and creativity?
It's very difficult to be creative if you're constantly under pressure. There's a certain amount of creative tension that is quite useful as part of the creative process, but so many people work in so-called creative industries, and actually they're deeply uncreative industries because everybody's under so much pressure to perform all of the time. And so they all go around, or rather their bosses go around patting everybody on the back saying, this is great stuff, this is really creative, and actually it's not. And it's because people are under pressure all of the time. So actually, if you really want to enhance your creativity, best thing to do is just be a little bit kinder to yourself, take your foot off the accelerator, and just that process of relaxing, you're going to be like a bottle of pop. Just take the cork off and all of a sudden you are just going to be filled with all of these amazing new creative ideas.
So because we're calming down, things can come to the top? Or
that's right. Yeah, they can just rise to the surface, because if you have a really busy mind, you're just not going to hear those great little ideas. And because the kind of constant haranguing, of our conscious mind.
I know it well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it just drowns out your best ideas, and you're essentially suppressing them. You're missing them.
It's just taking up all the mental space that in a monologue of,
and the energy of it. I mean, that's why great academics and philosophers, and also business leaders of the past and also the present, would just have their greatest ideas in the shower, going for a walk. I mean, Steve Jobs famously used to take his board of directors hiking when they really wanted to come up with some new ideas.
Because you're moving your whole body then, and everything's flowing a bit more internally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also you're in a different environment. It's very difficult to have a great idea if you're stuck with 15 other blokes along a wooden table in a white room somewhere, trying to come up with a really creative solution to a problem.
Yeah,
actually,
and also trying. Like you're just saying, trying to come up with it.
Absolutely,
it's like you say when you're in the shower, and it happens anyway.
Yeah,
there's an interesting balance there.
Yes,
and you talk about divergent versus convergent thinking in your book, and I think that's really interesting, because obviously when we're talking about mindfulness, there's a lot of talk about thoughts, and I think you've gone further into that by making a distinction really between two kind of different useful types of thinking. So what is the relationship there between convergent and divergent thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, creative thinking involves alternating cycles of divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is classic creative thought processes where you're spitting out wild ideas that just constantly, they just come bubbling up, they just appear. The flip side of that is convergent thinking, which is a lot more kind of rational. It's like gathering information, it's thinking stepwise, logically along a path. It is creative because you're building on thoughts and ideas, but then if you alternate your two ways of thinking, you end up with something that's incredibly powerful. So you do the kind of the learning and the logical number crunching, as it were, and then go off and consciously broaden your mind. Divergent thinking. So
the broadening. So you're diverging is going out almost, and not necessarily worrying about the consequence, and then the converging is coming together to turn that idea that you might have found into something real through more systems-based thinking.
So a very good way of solving a problem is, first stage is gathering as much information and ideas that you possibly can, and that's a process that can, if you've got a very specific problem, that can happen over hours and days, but ideally it goes on through experience over the years. And then if you consciously take a step back, broaden the context, and just take yourself off, take the pressure off yourself, then all of a sudden you give yourself space for these ideas to just come right out of your deep subconscious.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. So if mindfulness can make us more creative, is there a sense in which, is there a reverse to that? Can creative processes become mindful? Is there?
I think yes, you can, or they can. If, for example, you are a painter or a woodworker, somebody who's working with their hands, that process can itself, if you're focusing on the process rather than the end result, that can become a mindful process. So it's concentrating on the process rather than the end that's important. I think that's the crucial thing. If you're constantly focused on the end, you've already decided what the end results are going to be.
You're living for the moment where the thing is finished. Not in the moment while you're making it. Okay.
And I think it's not just a classic painting, visual art
Yeah.
approach that can benefit. You know, I mean, I think, you know, science, engineering, computer programming, all of these things can benefit.
Well, I was
enormously
going to
from
sort
it.
of say that. So if you're somebody watching this who thinks, you know, oh, I'm not creative, I'm not a musician, or I'm not anything like that, is creativity still relevant to them, or is this just about how to be more creative? Can you use creativity in other ways than being creative, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not criticising you, but that question comes from kind of a very westernized, mechanized, you know, end result orientated position. You know, preferably where there's a financial gain at the end of the day for somebody, probably not yourself, but for somebody. And actually, I think it's important to just do things for the sake of doing them. And obviously, we all have to earn a living.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a payoff at the end, but that should be secondary. And you know, like Google was founded by two software engineers who were, I think, they're like first or second year students. You know, and they were just interested in a problem. You know, how do you get information? You know, catalog information on the internet. They didn't know they were going to be the richest people in history. And I genuinely don't think they did it for that reason. It was when the money men came in and said, you know, you've got to have some advertising on here. That'll make some money. And they just thought, okay. And I think, you know, in all of the tech industries, it's not true now. I think they're just driven purely by money now. But they all started off interesting problems. How can we solve it?
You also talk about the idea of habit breaking in mindfulness for creativity. I wonder, could you explain a bit about what that might be?
Yeah, we're nature's habit machines. You know, well, all animals are really. Nature tries to get us to do things in the most efficient manner possible. So once we work out how to do it, whether it's foraging for food or solving a problem, it becomes automated. It becomes a habit, and you know, that is a fantastic adaptive trait. Imagine if you were trying to drive from one side of the city to another, and were consciously paying attention to changing gear, you know, all the things you need to do while driving. If you just couldn't do it, you'd be dead within 5 minutes. And so it's really, you know, habits are fantastic for automating really simple routine tasks. However, if you try and automate, you know, the creative process, you know, essentially what you're doing is you're immediately closing down the creative process. But the way our brains are designed, that happens very, very quickly and easily. So you have to consciously break all of your habits. And the great thing is all of our habits, they all nestle and support each other. So if you start breaking key habits, actually the whole structure starts to break down and kind of liberates your innate creativity. So it's really important each day to, you know, try and break a few habits. You know, it's very simple, a lot of these things. It's sitting in a different chair. It's watching different television programs, having a different drink, or having your normal drink in a different way, or in a different mug or a cup or whatever. You know, it's not a complicated process, but it tremendously powerful.
And I suppose if you're in your comfort zone when you're doing those, if you have a comfort zone, even down to your favorite mug, just changing a mug can potentially have the potential to make you more resilient, by the sounds of it, if it's expanding and stopping you relying on that habit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people's troubles actually come from being too tightly controlled by their habits, you know, because our brains will automate absolutely anything at all that we do more than a few times, you know, whether it's our thought processes, our routes to work, the way we solve problems, absolutely everything we are capable of doing, we are capable of turning into a habit. And so very quickly we close down new ways of thinking. and that is critical or critically bad.
Okay.
If you try and come up with new ideas. In fact, if you're struggling with a problem and you need to come up with a creative solution, the best thing you can do is literally just walk out the office or walk out your room and just do something, anything at all. And the chances are it will just set you off on a different track.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, and everybody will think, oh, that'd be ridiculous. That's just not going to work. Well, try it. You'll be surprised. You will change your approach to everything just by leaving that room. And maybe not thinking about the problem for a while. Just say, I've done a day's work. I'm not going to do anything more useful today, and just go outside, breathe some fresh air.
I'm going to try that. That's what I'll tell my boss I'm doing.
Yeah. It doesn't work every time, but you'd be surprised how often it works. Putting a problem to bed and forgetting about it for a few hours is very simple and very effective.
So we talked a little bit there, funnily enough, about Steve Jobs and Google, and it feels as though in the 8 years since you wrote Frantic World, that the world's become a bit more frantic, maybe due to technology, but also the gig economy.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you agree? And should that affect how we approach meditation at all?
I think the world has become quite a bit more frantic over the last 8 years. Yeah. I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, because it's the time when people are suddenly going to wake up. It's always, I suppose, it's that old Marxist idea of things have got to get really critically bad before people will rise up and change things. And I think that's true now.
It's a very positive spin.
Well, it's only when people will demand social change when it's when they can't stand it anymore. That's the sad reality, really. Our present social, political, and economic system has reached some kind of crisis point, and I'm an optimist. I can
tell from your
I hope things will change for the better.
On that positive note, I'd like to discuss your newest book, The Art of Breathing. It really is a beautiful book. It kind of combines not only words, but with these engravings and the beautiful minimal color scheme. I'll kind of flick through this on the camera in a moment to show people. And it's written almost like prose. There's no wasted space in the book. There's everything that needs to be in there is in there, and there's nothing in there that doesn't need to be in there. And I just wonder how deliberate was that? Were you trying to write something very different from what you've written before?
Yeah, I wanted to distill all the key points about mindfulness into the shortest book possible. And it's actually the book I enjoyed writing the most. Each day I would just go to a different cafe. This is going to make people sick. This idea that you just write a book, go to a different cafe every day and have a different cake. And
well, you were habit breaking every day.
Exactly,
by the
that's
sounds of it.
But I really, really loved doing it. Each day I just come up with, just a page or two, and it only took me about 8 or 10 weeks to write, because I was just constantly going to different places and just putting on loads of loud music, or different cafes would have different types of music.
Interesting.
Just seeing what
that proves that what you've just been talking to us about definitely works. If you want to write a book in 8 weeks, then just break your habits every day. In your new book, you say that it's impossible to be unhappy and curious at the same time. And that seems to feed into some of the ideas in Mindfulness for Creativity as well. And I just wonder, what are your thoughts on this idea of curiosity?
Well, it is. I mean, this is absolutely true. It's impossible to feel unhappy and curious at the same time, because as soon as you start finding things interesting, everything else is just pushed aside. You're just sucked into that moment of like whatever you're curious about. It's all unhappy thoughts, all stress and anxiety. They just fall by the wayside.
So if you're someone who's in your head, then curiosity takes you outside almost. Is that kind of how it works? Yeah,
because that's what, one of the basic skills of mindfulness is being curious about, say, your breathing, for example, or, doing a body scan. You're just curious about the sensations in your toes or your knees or whatever. So bringing that spirit of curiosity to anything at all, just everything, all of your problems just dissolve, almost instantly. And that's the great thing, is if your thoughts are really dark and clouded, just going outside and just walking around and just looking around you and just becoming curious about whatever is going on around you, and you'll find that actually most things are interesting. If you approach it in the right way, most things are interesting. Start asking questions and observing. That's one of the most powerful aspects of mindfulness, is that cultivation of curiosity.
It's been out for just about a year now. And have you had good feedback for it? People enjoying it?
Yeah. I mean, the have a look at the reviews for yourself.
Yeah, okay.
People seem to. Some people are disappointed because it's short.
Okay.
And
that's the thing that I like the most about it, is that I felt like it's a refresher for me, having read many books about it and then reading it, and that's why I mentioned the brevity of it.
I mean, if people are disappointed because it's so short, go and buy one of my.
If anyone's saying that it's bad because it's short, count that as a 5-star review, please. I'm asking one question to everyone who I'm interviewing, which is, if anyone watching this can change something today that will improve their well-being tomorrow, what might it be? I'm sorry to shock you with that one.
Politics is pretty depressing at the moment, but it has been depressing for about 3 years or so.
Maybe longer.
Maybe longer. And I've probably dated this video by saying that, but maybe people will be watching this in 5 years and we've reached some kind of
world peace.
Yeah. Prosperity for all mankind or all humanity.
Yeah. So is it don't listen to politics? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that's what I keep telling myself. I tell myself that several times a day, but I always do, because I just love politics. To me, it's like the ultimate game of 3D chess, and so I can't get away from it. It drives me nuts.
So do you watch the news at 10?
Well, I listen to it mostly on the radio. I'm constantly checking the net. And I just love it. I've always, ever since I was a child, I've been fascinated by politics, the political ideas, and it's how humanity resolves its biggest, most pressing issues. And lots of people hate it. Lots of people, and I quite understand that, because it's really frustrating and it's really complicated. But I just love it.
Danny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
So Danny's got some really interesting thoughts there about creativity, and if you found any of that interesting and it might be relevant for you, then pick up a copy of his book, Mindfulness for Creativity, where it's a kind of 8-week course, but rather than focusing on stress and anxiety, it's really about improving creativity as a means to reducing those other things. And of course, his latest book, The Art of Breathing, it really is a beautiful book filled with illustrations, and the typography is different on each page to reflect different things. And it's a great refresher if you've perhaps been meditating for a while and got a bit bored or got a bit lost with it, then this book, you can read it in just a matter of hours and it will hopefully re-inspire you. In a couple of weeks, I'll be talking to Danny's co-author on Mindfulness for Health, Vijamala Birch. If you hit subscribe, you'll be able to watch that interview in a couple of weeks.